demanded from themselves what they're demanding Israel to do. And,
Yes,
and like I said,
and
we're not talking about the difference between Danes and Swedes or Finns and Swedes or whatever. Now we're talking about people who believe in a liberal, pluralistic, civil society with people who reject everything that they represent.
yes,
so where do you go forward from that?
Well, here is the situation too. Is that when you have a misunderstanding of when transpardon is a big issue, it's a point of heat, because on the other side they do not understand what actually transpired in that situation. And also their culture is not similar to Israeli culture. They have a very different culture than we do, and it's their feeling that Israel took the land from them and that a bunch of Jews came from Europe and just took their land, when Israel has had more than a 3,000-year presence in the land. And basically it's an issue where when Israel was formed, even in the proclamation of independence of Israel, Arabs were included in Israeli society. They were given a voice in the government. As you said, we are a pluralistic society. We are democratic, and we allow representation in our country, a fair representation. So even with giving all of those things, the Palestinians feel that they are oppressed, and they feel that they do not have equal rights in Israel. Because yes, we do have checkpoints, and yes, we do find various tunnels that are smuggling in weapons into Gaza, primarily from Iran, and various networks that Iran connects with to bring those arms into Gaza. So it's very, very strange on who would be seen as the oppressor and who would be seen as the oppressed.
Yeah, exactly. I would like to pose a question, not just to you, but to anyone who disagrees with us that Israel, is what we say a liberal democracy and has tried all these different policies and programs and whatsoever, to bring a solution to the conflict. Whatever. I always like to pose a question to them. Those who think that Israel is the chief evil in the world. Okay, yes. What would you suggest that the Israelis do that they haven't tried already? What would you do? What would you suggest that they do that they haven't tried? Now this is the key. What they haven't tried already. The reason I bring this up is that an Israeli ambassador that I had discussions with back in Helsinki a few years ago, he said that the former minister, the former foreign minister from Sweden, Trivald, I forget her name. It was a female foreign minister, and Lila Trivald, I believe his name, something like that. And she waltzed into his office in Jerusalem at the MFA, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And she came in, burst into the room, okay, and said, this is in relationship to the defense, the anti-terror fence that circles the Arabs in the west, or the Judea and Samaria and so forth, through the snakes through Jerusalem. And she said, you can't do this, you're doing this, you can't do that, you're doing this, you can't do this, that. She laid out everything they couldn't do. And so the Israeli official took a picture out of his drawer, set it in front of her, and said, this is the daughter of my secretary who was just blown up on a bus. What would you have me say to her about this fence? That we can't have it. What would you tell her that we should do that we haven't done before, that we haven't tried before. You look at how Israel has had a number of different governments going from the left to the right, different prime ministers, everybody's speaking with a different voice, because in Israeli government, everybody's got a voice, and they do not adhere to a certain line, as they do in the Palestinian Authority. Why? Because the Palestinian Authority is not a democracy of a civil society. It is a thugocracy. Sorry, if you don't like it, that's my point. That's my view. But multiple governments in Israel have tried to reach some type of accommodation with the Arabs. The Arabs speak with one voice. No, 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 no. Okay. The point being is this, is that what would you advise the Israelis to do? Anybody in this, the viewers here, anybody that's here on the right-hand side, tell me, please, what can the Israelis do that they haven't tried before to bring
Israel will respond that they have tried everything, from cultural exchange, working with commonalities like music, culture, dance. Israelis have done educational student exchanges and programming to learn about each other's culture. We have done numerous dialogues, numerous offerings, numerous efforts to, including giving our land to them. And the point is that the dialogue for them is, we're not finished with the dialogue until we have all of the land. That is their main goal. And when you have that attitude and you want everything, they were even offered, they were complaining about the portion of Jerusalem, for example. They were offered that by Ehud Barak, and they refused that. So in that sense, that's an example that shows, one of many examples, that they're not interested in a part of anything in Israel. They're not interested in living side by side with Israel in peace. No. They are interested in ruling all of Israel under their authority. And when you know that, and when you have a nation that is indigenous like Israel versus a group of people that constantly call for your destruction and actively attempt to carry it out, the answer to your question becomes very difficult. What is there left to try should be the question. What is left to try?
Exactly. You tell me both, though. It's not for a lack of trying. I mean, we're gonna, every United States president at the beginning of his presidency, ultimately, and without a question mark, will always proceed in the to try to solve or create conditions for a peace process between the two sides. And,
Also, you have an issue. Pardon me. Also, you have the issue is, who do you negotiate with, and who do you that you're negotiating with the right leader and the right person. Israel faces that problem many, many times. Israel faces that problem. And basically, again, this is very common, not only with the Palestinian Authority, but when you look at different ways that Muslims fight each other. The idea is to push and to push and to push and to push until you get a little bit, then you get a little bit more, and then you get everything. That is a standard method of warfare that has been among the Muslims since their entire beginnings. So basically, when they are talking, They are not talking just to get a little. They are talking to eventually do whatever they can to get everything.
Yeah.
Israel.
I think it's also key.
Go ahead.
I think it's also key to understand the jargon. What Arabs say themselves and what they say for international consumption, and what the willing media just basically regurgitate, having a clue of exactly what the heck they're talking about. When they want Hamas want a for example, Hamas wants a ceasefire with Israel. Well, to begin with, Israel said we didn't pick up the gun; they started it. Whatever recent situation, they can lay down their gun and we'll have a ceasefire. We didn't start it, but to understand, for example, Hudna, which is a Islamic term, means a 10-year ceasefire, and which is according to how Muhammad arranged things, and it's able to be broken according to how they see things progressing, according to their own advantage. And it means absolutely nothing in the Western context. You can't treat things like like you're dealing with a Swede between a Norwegian. You can't deal with this like that. And there's two different psychologies working.
Yes, this is the main point, is you have two very different philosophies at work, and you have an issue where the action that Israel takes when a ceasefire is called is exactly that. That means no weapons, no shooting, nothing. But 20 minutes after one of the ceasefires were called, which there was more than one, against the violence, the Palestinians broke that ceasefire because they don't understand the concept of what a ceasefire means. Obviously, if they're continuing to escalate violence, even after a ceasefire is called.
I would say, Zamira, I would say that it's not that they don't understand what a ceasefire means, but they reject the Western concept of what a ceasefire is. And they go according to how they think. And anything that advances their cause, anything that advances, pushes the goalpost forward, they will. They understand full well that you can't use an ambulance to shuttle fighters, terrorists, we'll just say fighters, from back and forth. Yeah, that's an egregious breach of international law, but they'll do so willingly. And the willing media turns a blind eye to it until it's exposed by somebody else outside of the regular media. So I mean,
well, please also remember that the Quran, which is their source, says that you do anything and everything to subdue your enemy, from lying to deception to cheating. It's completely acceptable. It's completely acceptable, and it's stated in the Quran that gives them the permission to do that.
Yeah. Again, this brings us back to my original thought before everybody else that I see has popped online, that there has to be a basic understanding of the two different sides. You can't approach them as, this is what I've heard so many times. Two peoples in the sandbox fighting out for the last 2,000-3,000 years. It's just going to continue until whatever, the cows come home. And the truth of the matter is that you have two fundamentally different societies. One, not perfect, no democracy, representational government is perfect, but you've got one side, Israel, that for all of its warts, for all of its flaws, and then you have another side that people basically heap all kinds of platitudes upon, like they're superhuman, never done anything wrong, and it's all Israel's fault. That's bullcrap. I would ask anybody on the other side of the fence that, do you actually believe that you could stand there on the street corner with a sign saying, "I love Israel," in Ramallah or even in Gaza City, where it's run by Hamas? Do you actually think anybody could actually voice their opinion freely.
No.
And
It's
if
punishable
not,
by
then
death.
there's
It's punishable by death in a Palestinian
this is the
society.
point. This is the point I'm getting. So this is the point I'm getting to is this: is that when people with the news media reports on a poll taken in Israel, and saying 62% of Israel favors some type of accommodation with Palestinians, or view favorable President Obama's latest peace overture. Does it really mean diddly squat what the average Palestinian says or polled, and those numbers, whether or not they actually mean anything at all, when it's an authoritarian regime where people are just like, for example, if I look at Hezbollah, I look at Hamas, and even Fatah, in the exact same way as I look at, for example, Al Capone in old-time Chicago. How people, it's exactly the same. They're mafia. And they own everything. They rule with an iron fist. Nothing happens outside of their territory that they don't know about. Except, for example, maybe even the more crazy fundamentalist Muslims who don't even believe that Hamas is actual Islamic group that represents Islam. But anyways, let me get back to my point: is that these three entities hand out largesse, hand out jobs, hand out all kinds of things, even their social services, healthcare and so on and so forth. It's all by through, corruption and clans. So you've got this entity on one side, and you've got Israel on the other side. You're telling me that these two, different societies, are the same, that you would be willing to deal with somebody like that? Please, anybody here, jump in anytime you want. I just wish it weren't so. But that's
keep in mind.
Naked truth. It's a naked truth.
Keep in mind, Ken, I just want to make one point, is that out of every part of the Arab world, the Palestinians are treated better in Israel than they would be treated in any one of their Arab neighbors. That includes getting medical care. That includes, even if you talk to different Muslims in different lands, they find Palestinians to be they are prejudiced against them. If you ask them. So you're talking about a society that lives next to another society that has served their women to make sure that they have healthy children in Israeli hospitals. When they have been wounded, Israel has given care to them without prejudice and good care to them. And in addition to also supporting them with food and utilities, in which Israelis pay very, very high prices to maintain their livelihood, where the Palestinians are living in a much better world, because not only are the Israelis supporting them, but the international communities are supporting them in the media, and also through activists that will be willing to go and support them and bring other things into them. So they're getting every possible aid. They're claiming, and as far as the claim that Israel is blocking aid coming into their areas, which is completely false. Israel, on more than one occasion, on every occasion, ships thousands and thousands of tons of goods into them daily. So, by truckload.
Joan is right. Yeah, when aid gets to Gaza, Hamas often steals the aid. Very right, Joan. You're absolutely correct. Oil and everything else. Everybody else can suck eggs if they have the eggs to suck.
But keep in mind
There's
too that the new thing that is happening is the Palestinians are also refusing now when Israel brings that aid into them. They won't accept it because it's Israeli aid. Okay, so you have a lot of food that will come in and then it spoils because they refuse to accept it because it came in from Israel. But still, Israel provides these very common staples for them, good food, I mean, quality product. They're not getting bottom of the line. Okay.
Hey, Samira, have you ever wondered, how can there actually be, I'm sorry, I hate to laugh, how can there actually be a genocide and ethnic cleansing
exactly.
of people who are obese? Who are obese? What can you say? Gaza and the West, Judea and Samaria, where the Arabs are there, they have an obesity problem. Excuse me? How does that happen?
Yes, I suppose that they're starving.
So much crap all surrounding this. I mean, a good friend of mine always said that, in a world void of anti-Semitism, the war against Israel could not exist. When it comes down to that, it could not exist. And this whole thing is kept artificially going for the last, as long as Israel has been, existing, or at least until it became a political football during the Cold War. That is through international, pressure that this whole thing has been broiling like it is. And they know Norway has just been forced to admit that its aid going to the Palestinian Authority has indirectly been going to serve terrorists.
Yes.
And this has been, brought to bear, through Palestinian Media Watch, Itamar Marcus. And it was on also NRK, the Norwegian state TV broadcaster. One brave journalist, because there's not very many brave journalists in Norway. It's one of the chief promoters of anti-Semitism, anti-Israel hatred, in Europe today. One of the top. And one brave journalist did a documentary, and it's been it's been reverberating through the Norwegian political debate. How could our money actually be funding terrorism? And by the way, Norway wants to present itself as a humanitarian state. The poster child of humanitarianism, and yet their aid is going to serve Palestinian terrorism. So I mean, it's outside forces have been at play here. And by the way, Muslim, the imam and so forth, these influential imams outside of Israel, outside of the Palestinian Arabs territory, basically dictating how Hamas is to understand their position vis-a-vis the Jewish state. So there's outside partners in there. That's
well, there is also the claim, that Israelis are forcing them out of their land, and that the settlements are the cause of the conflict, the major barrier to peace, as is the Palestinian claim. Keep in mind that there are Jewish communities that have been completely uprooted for the sake of Palestinians moving into those areas. Mm-hmm. And these people who are building homes on their own land, Kenneth, okay, that is legally Jewish land, and could not build their own homes on their own land from pressure, are forced out of their homes so that Muslims can come and move into that area, to Palestinians can move there. And these Jewish people are not resettled yet. So basically, for them to make such a claim, again, numerous claims that are false, organizations like the BDS that are constantly perpetrating lies against Israel in the media, these are obstructions to peace. When you're being dishonest about what is actually going on. And your point at the very beginning of this conversation there is your side, my side, and the truth. Okay?
Yeah.
Neither Israeli society knows that when we make a mistake, we make it. But we make every effort to correct that mistake. And we also are the first ones to apologize. And really not only just say with our words, but also with our actions to correct mistakes. I don't see that on the other side.
And Israelis do not celebrate people killed either accidentally or even in military conflict with Palestinian terrorists and so forth. There's no passing out of sweets. There's no dancing the hurrah in the middle of the square. If it does, it's an anomaly. The other side of the coin, we've got ample evidence, that shows that every time a child is blown up or somebody in the pizza parlor, killed, that people are really overjoyed.
And the Muslim answer to that is we are being brainwashed by the media. We see such video evidence that our medias are brainwashing us, and that is very strange to me, because when these incidences occur, they are filmed as they are occurring at the moment that they are occurring. Okay, and there's no like, for instance, I'm sure you know the term Pallywood, where there are stage, yes, okay, you don't see Israelis staging things to present into the media. Like, for instance, somebody laying down on the ground, and then all of a sudden, and they're supposed to be wounded, and then all of a sudden, a few minutes later, the same person is getting up, because you catch that on film. Israelis don't have time for that, okay? We don't have time to stage media or stage events, okay? We are recording incidences as they are occurring, and we are sharing the experience that Israelis have on a day-to-day basis, every single day, when we are dealing with this type of enemy.
Mm-hmm.
There is a difference.
I would also add that Israelis, as on a whole, treat the Arabs in a more not only just humane way, but in a more equal way than what Westerners will treat them. And what I mean by this is that there's a term coined by somebody from Jerusalem Center of Public Affairs, Manfred Gerstenfeld, who was humanitarian racism. And other people have used a similar term, soft racism. Basically, where you lower the standards because to those people who do not come from your own culture and background. And that Israel treats the Arabs as equals, so far as that they demand from Arabs that they demand from themselves. And if an agreement is to be made, well, it better be made. If it's signed, it's signed. You adhere to what you agreed to.
That's a key point. Adhere to what you agreed to, right here. This is a major, because again, you have the cultural difference. You have a Western society tradition, and Israelis are not only Western society. There are many Jews that constitute the Israeli society that their ancestors have lived and have grown up their entire lives in Muslim lands. So basically, those Israelis really understand. I mean, my own family members are a part of that group. We understand the culture, and we understand the differences, the very vast differences between the two cultures. And basically, when you make an agreement, for us, we adhere to it. For them, like you said earlier as well, is that they can by any means break that agreement if it's going to achieve a purpose, which is their altogether important goal. Mm-hmm. So that is a key thing that has to be very much understood by, the rest of our viewers and also the international community, which often, remember, they didn't grow up in these lands. They don't have any idea, many of them, what the culture is all about, whether it be Israeli culture or whether it be Muslim culture. They are meeting people. They live with them in certain countries in Europe, and certain, of course, in the United States of America, we are living with them. But Americans, for the most part, really do not interact with Muslims by visiting each other on a grand scale and spending a lot of time with them. Europeans have, in many countries, had them assimilate into their lands to where they interact. And then they have been affected by that interaction when the Muslims grow into larger numbers, as you see in many, many European nations. And of course, with the issue of Israel, you have that fear as well as the population, where Israelis deal with the terrorism in addressing their leadership. And if we have to use, various issues, our efforts to stop their infrastructure, there will be not one leader, but maybe 10, 20 more leaders that Israel will have to deal with. What Israel disrupts the infrastructure of the terrorist networks. So that is one of the major problems that Israel faces in dealing.
There's a lot more beneath the surface that most people just do not take into consideration. And again, to understand these things, you have to go back to the rudimentaries of understanding the differences between the two societies.
Yes.
Where do you go from here? We can always. I guess Israel has always, put emphasis on still, regardless of the situation as it is, there might not be a political situation right now to exploit. What I mean by exploit is to take advantage of, to end the conflict. But still, they put emphasis on, exchange of cultures and coexistence and so forth. And you just do not see that on the Palestinian side. There's just
correct.
There might be there might be something. I mean, not all the Arabs are evil. Shock, surprise. There are some people who would like to just get on with their life. But they live within a system that doesn't allow for individual opinions and
correct.
So forth. That run counter to the clan and the political elite that's above them. So there's this structure that's above the average individual there that they just can't cope with, can't hope to cope with. But
yes, because there are pressures upon them that were they to show any connection with Israelis, even a dialogue, it could result in them being killed publicly as an example for the rest of the community. And this is very common.
Not too many people realize, back in the days when it was still called, Palestine, or Palestine Mandate, Palestine, whichever you want to phrase it, that, people just look at the situation there, that when they think of immigrants is just basically in the Jewish context. But, the Arabs there are just as much immigrants to the area. There's indigenous and there's also immigrant waves. Just as
correct. Yet we never have this shared in publicly, and yet Israel is demonized daily for the idea of nationalism. We're saying, what is another point that I have to very much make clear is to be a nationalist and be proud of your nation. To be a nationalist and to be proud of your nation does not mean you're excluding other groups of people. This is another common
course
claim
not.
that is made against Israel. If we are asking for Israel to be a Jewish nation, and that is what Israel is, a Jewish nation, that does not mean that we're excluding Christians, that we're excluding Muslims, that we're excluding any group of people that are willing to live peacefully with us, in our society. So when people define Zionism, for example, they feel that, use terms like this is a Nazi ideology, and that your ideology means that you want to expel all Arabs from Israel. Fundamentally, Israel has proven time and time again that Israel has been very open and accepting of Arabs in Israel, and also accepting of Christians in Israel. So basically, we have to focus too on countering the misconceptions and helping people to really understand terms like Zionism. What does it mean? Not what somebody else has told you what it means. What have you researched, and what is the technical definition? And how is that definition, according to Israelis, how have they implemented that definition?
Yeah.
It's very important.
Well, one of the, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that one of the key pillars of Zionism, basically the last remaining pillar left unfilled, is to be accepted as equals amongst their neighbors. And that means
Correct.
Within their land, within their own territory, and their surrounding area. And I mean, the beginning of the immigration flow, from Europe and from other, Arab countries and so forth, of Jews. But I don't remember the exact name of the clan. It was in Mashabiri, I believe, and there was two major clans that of Arabs that had different, they were vying for power between each other, and the Al Husseini clan won out. Now the other one, it was a bit more moderate towards Jews and so forth, and they didn't win out. The Al Husseini clan did, and Arafat belonged to that clan. The Mufti of Jerusalem, Hajj Amin Al Husseini, was a member of that clan, and not all Arabs had negative views of Jews. The Druze,
Yes,
for example,
that's true.
and all the other little mystery cult Muslims.
That's true, and there are many Arabs that work for human rights. There are many Muslims that make every effort to try to also contribute and also support with the fullness of their hearts. They support Israel, and they even serve in our military. So, I mean, we
even had an ambassador from Israel here in Finland, and he was Druze.
Yes,
So,
the Druze
he's
are
an
play
Arab,
a very
he's an
important
Arab as
role
much
in
as
Israel.
Yeah.
They play a very
So, I mean-
important role in Israel, but even the Druze, they have their complaints, but I will say that they are steadfast and loyal and very close to Israel. Israel has many, many Druze that have contributed much to Israeli society, and Israeli Arabs that have contributed much to Israeli society. So we're not lumping all Muslims as enemies, but we are saying that terrorists clearly are our enemies. We do deal with terrorism aggressively because there is no other way to deal with the terrorism, because that enemy is going to kill you, and you have to understand that. You have to be prepared to defend yourself. It's either you defend yourself or you're going to be killed. It's simple as that.
Yeah.
That is the reality.
Here's another question I like to pose to people who come from the opposite side of the fence. For example, with Hamas, um, who maintain the fiction that you can actually deal with these people, you can negotiate with them, or that they make overtures, that the moderate branch of Hamas are making overtures towards Israel. It's just that the Israelis are just so blind to actually see this, or refuse to acknowledge it because they just want to keep the conflict going on for whatever reason it's supposed to be. The question I would pose is, vis-a-vis Hamas, is how can you expect an organization whose genesis began on predicated on the notion that to destroy the Jewish entity? How can you expect an organization like Hamas, with that type of background, to accept living next to forever the Jewish state, which by doing so would negate their very existence? Now, the Arabs can be, Islamic, and as long as it's not posing a threat to Israel, Israel can care less. Do whatever you want. But when it comes to them, how can you expect them to change their spots, literally, to deny themselves in order to make peace with them? It's just not rational thought. That their beginning, the reason why they came to be, and it's in their party platform, to destroy the Jewish state. That is
Correct.
Their end goal. So to ask them to negotiate with Israel is also demanding them to negate their very existence. I've asked foreign policy makers this question, and all they could, one for example from Finland, and all she could say after our multiple emails between each other is that at the end we'll just have to hope for the best. That's all she could say. She couldn't give an answer to that conundrum. You can't expect somebody dedicated to your destruction to change spots, to negate their very existence. They're going to accept you. It's just not reality. And so people who believe in this type of thinking, they're utopians. Absolutely utopians.
The other question is why is Israel expected to address the issue of this problem, and none of the Arab nations are held accountable to take responsibility for their people who have a mutual culture, a mutual language, a mutual religious belief, and a mutual political system? Why is Israel the one that is asked to take on this responsibility? And why
because they don't expect them to.
But see, this is an important question.
It's a racism. It's a softer racism. They lower their expectations from people who from third world countries, especially from the Middle East. They just believe that you don't treat them like you would treat somebody from a fellow European country. They have the expectations.
There's also the issue of political agendas. When will we focus? When will we focus less on political agendas, and when will we focus more on humanity, on the preservation of humanity? Because when we are dealing only with the political agendas, and people are just making a lot of money, the money disappears eventually, but the humanity endures generation to generation. So that is a concern for me.
One second. You bring up a good point about the money, and it was just recently released. About the aid that has gone to the Palestinian Authority.
Yes.
As well as in Gaza, the whole entity itself, both areas combined. Since the mid '80s to present day, that is the total amount spent is like 25 times the amount spent on the Marshall Plan for the reconstruction of Europe. 25 times the amount. Where has the money gone, people? Where has it gone?
That is a good question.
Anybody, here in this forum right now, ever runs into somebody who's like, the poor Palestinians, they just don't have the money. They're living in poverty. They're this, that, and the other. Excuse me, but why is that the reason? And then you look at the fat cat, mansions that dot the countryside, in Judea and Samaria, and as well as in Gaza, and the big bank accounts, abroad. You know that the money's being funneled. International aid is a death sentence for societies. The Palestinians are the poster child for national movements of what not to do. Now, there was a article written by the former editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post, Bret Stephens. This is about 7-8 years ago, and I'll never forget it. It's called "Toilets in the Sand," and basically there was a novel from World War II, and the guy walks into this hut somewhere in Indonesia, whatever. And the guy's got a porcelain toilet sitting in, near outside of his hut. He goes, "Why do you have that there?" He goes, "It has no function. Why is it there?" "Well, because it pleases me. It looks good." And he used that as a means to bring about a deeper point, that the Palestinians, they have their emblems, they have their flags, they have their ministries and the Muqtada and they have all the trappings of what a state could be, but they lack everything else. They're like a toilet in the sand. There's no plumbing. There's nothing underneath except
exactly. And how can you claim that you are going to be a state that's going to participate in the international community and be and run a state when you're so focused on killing Jews?
Exactly. I mean, was it Nathan Sharansky said that, I think he put it quite eloquently. He said, as long as the Arabs, the Palestinian Arabs, present a threat to themselves, they will always be an existential threat to Israelis. And the creation of the civil society in the Palestinian Authority is the greatest problem to solve. You solve that problem, then you solve the problem with their protracted war against it. As long as they are, victimizing themselves, they will always pose an existential threat to Israel.
Exactly right.
It's the black and white truth, and only people that I've ever met that are utopian minded, is on the other side of the equation. They just you can talk to them, spell out these points, black and white, and then the next day when you talk to them, it's like you never even said anything. They'll just keep spitting out like they have Tourette's syndrome. It's Israel's fault.
Exactly right.
It's like give me a break. Only a utopian-minded person who's not based in reality will have these insane, stupid thoughts.
Well, because remember that when people are not listening and when they have tunnel vision, keep in mind that they also have an agenda. They have a goal in which they're going to reach. So basically,
these are the pseudo-humanitarians. That's what they are, pseudo-humanitarians.
I agree. And I believe also that, again, you have a society and groups of people that hate Israel more than anything. So they're not going to listen to facts. They're going to create facts of their own so that they can assist in removing Israel from the world. This is the effort on most every anti-Semite that exists in the world.
Yeah.
Whether they be be extremists or whether they be any other form of anti-Semite.
Yeah. Well, regardless of the BDS movement, the boycotting Israel movement that's been making its way around the universities and labor unions around the West and so forth, even in the United States, unfortunately, to my displeasure. Regardless of that, I think the average person is getting so stone dead tired of these platitudes coming from the Palestinians themselves and their supporters. That this apologetics of why everything's so damn rotten with them, and it's always the other side's fault. That people are just I don't want my tax money going there anymore, and it's never good to be the center of a boycott. Israel's been the center of one since the day it was formed from the Arab League and so forth. But I think people are growing tired of even hearing about it. It's not a big ticket item outside of especially in the United States. It's not big on anybody's radar screen. Here in Finland, it is. I mean, it's like you can click on the TV station, the state program, state broadcaster is the one that promotes it most than any other channel. But in the United States, where it really does matter, people are not watching this at all. Only when something actually happens in the news, and then it's over in like a couple minutes, and then it's
because American society is based on living their lives in their own niche. Basically, in California, for example, there is a very large left lobby, and they basically live their lives, and they feel distant from this conflict. That it's like, okay, we're here, and the conflict is over there, so it really has no basis for me to think about it every single day. In my case, I have family and friends, the IDF, and also living in these conditions each and every single day. So of course it's on my mind all the time, and basically I devote my life not only to address these issues, but also internationally when you have extremism that is affecting anyone that is non-Muslim. This is a concern for me because I'm seeing many societies. I'm seeing Hindus, Jews, Christians being destroyed, their holy shrines being destroyed, their society completely destroyed as a result of not being able to rebuild and not being able to resettle and be comfortable in their lives because a bunch of illiterate people and a bunch of extremists are destroying their basic life. This is unacceptable to me, and that's why I have devoted my life to protecting the human rights of religious minorities in Muslim lands, and also in particularly Am Yisrael Chai. Israel is my country always, and that is a priority for me, to fight against the violence, to fight against any laws that oppress other nations just because they are not Islamic. I find it absolutely unacceptable, and again, I will do every effort on my part and encourage others to, when you're speaking about Israel, tell the facts, be truthful, stop spreading lies over the media, over the internet. Be really sure that you understand Israeli and Jewish history before you comment on Israeli and Jewish history, because 9 in 10 comments that happen that are on the opposite side are based on myths and things that have no basis in reality. And this is what we call hasbara in Hebrew, that we disseminate correct information about Israel. And that would be my message to our viewers and anyone else in the international community as well.
No, I totally agree with you. I mean, I just wish that on the other side of the fence, especially our European and U.S. and Australian and whoever else, folks that definitely have a different opinion about the conflict than we do, that they would address these issues in the same forthright, honest way, without the vitriol, invective, and the spittle. I hate the spittle when they spit when they talk. It's just terrible. They just can't. You just gotta get it all out. They can't speak in tone voices, and they just gotta shout down their opponent and so forth. If they would actually voice a little bit of sympathy for the other side, have a little bit of empathy, and put yourself in somebody else's shoes. I think we've had enough of people from our side empathizing with the Palestinian Arabs. And
I agree, and I think that the time has come where they are surrounded by so much truth that the international community has to react. They have to react in a way in support of Israel, because Israel backs its facts. Israel doesn't disseminate false information. When Israel collects its facts, you can bet that there is no ulterior motive. The only motive is to protect our people and our citizens from ongoing terrorist activity. That we all live in a peaceful society that's all-inclusive of whoever wants to be welcome into Israel. That is our message to the world. And I feel that it is a very, very, very important message, because too many people are being lost. We are losing many lives from many different cultures as a result of this problem. It starts in Israel. When things are wrong in Israel, it emanates out into the rest of the world.
Yeah. Well, the problem with conflict with Muslim world, with the jihad, that's a whole topic that we could take up for about 3 hours.
Exactly.
And we're just barely hitting the tip of the iceberg. But just keeping it on the subject, at hand. That I think that if people and I'm just speaking to those of us listening to this conversation right now in live time, heard us speak, basically about the differences between the sides, the efforts on the Israeli side to reach accommodation in many different ways, measures, and so forth, reacting to rational, reasonable expectations from the international community, but they won't sacrifice their own security for somebody else's whim. Outside of that, I think that people on the opposite side of the coin here, on the side of the divide, have to again come down off their high horse, stop being a utopian, put yourself in other people's position, think about it in a realistic how you would want to live, side by side with somebody.
Exactly.
Would you want to have a crazy neighbor? Would you want to live next to a crazy neighbor, 30 Kalashnikovs and hand grenades, and basically saying, gee, tomorrow you're next. Would you want to live next to somebody like that? And if not, stop demanding that Israel has to do that.
I would thank you for that comment, because I have to agree 100%. This is a major point of contention. As remember, historically, our people from past to the current time, and even in the future, we will face constant pressure when we are simply trying to live peacefully in our land that was given to us. Mm-hmm. And we are a people that reaches out to the world. We are the first people that go and help in an international crisis, as you have seen in Haiti, as you have seen in Japan, as you have seen in various countries around the world. Israel has so much to offer the world and has given so much to the world. Why would you reject such a society? Why would the international community reject such a society and support terrorism? That is a question that I have.
No, me too, and I believe that we've answered it in part to some extent, considering about the outside international players that have vetted an interest in keeping these situations going for their own political reasons and agendas. Yeah. And as far as the United States goes, it basically sticks by its ally, because the average American still today believes that they have they can identify with a fellow democracy, and basically have an aversion to people that would choose to live in an authoritarian type of society, and its government is foreign and so forth. The rest of Europe, it's half of one thing and a dozen of the other. I mean, you have some very, very good, states, for example, like the Czech Republic and Italy, even to some extent. Finland has never been traditionally an anti-Israel state, even though there are some players that definitely are anti-Israel, including the current foreign minister here. But yes. I think that these international players, have a great responsibility, and to some extent, a lot of people's blood on their hands for allowing these things to fester and so forth, by not treating the issues as they are in a realistic way. Placing their own expectations upon Israel, when they would never, ever, ever choose to follow the same policies if they were in the same situation. If Finland was being literally bombed with rockets from the Åland Islands, which is between it's Finnish sovereignty over the islands, is between Finland and Sweden. If the Finnish former capital of Turku was being bombed, daily with rockets from Åland, the response would be entirely different.
Exactly, because Israel is often pressured and asked to show restraint in these matters, when any other nation in the world, as you are very clearly saying, would act instantaneously against such an attack. The United States